I will never forget the expression on Karen's face as red and blue lights washed over her perfectly manicured lawn. She stood there with her arms folded, that familiar smug grin stretched wide as she pointed theatrically toward our gated driveway. In her mind, this was her victory lap after weeks of relentless interference. The two police officers walked up at an unhurried pace, and I watched everything unfold through our security camera feed. One officer raised a hand to his earpiece, listening closely. His demeanor shifted almost instantly, and he turned back toward Karen with clear doubt in his eyes. "Ma'am, dispatch is informing us this call was unfounded," he said evenly. "There is no emergency at this location." Karen's confidence evaporated in a heartbeat. Her mouth fell open. "That can't be right." I heard screaming. "Something illegal is going on in there," she snapped, her voice climbing into that shrill register I had grown to loathe. What Karen didn't know, what she could never have anticipated, was that the dispatcher who answered her 911 call was my wife, Elaine. And Elaine had recognized Karen's voice the moment she heard it. Elaine and I had moved into our dream house just 3 months earlier. It sat on a gorgeous stretch of land bordering the Oakwood Estates neighborhood. Technically, we were outside the Homeowners Association's jurisdiction, though our driveway shared the same entrance road. The previous owners had emphasized that point during the sale. Our home was private property, completely exempt from HOA regulations. We had legal paperwork confirming it. Unfortunately, none of that mattered to Karen Wilkins, the self-declared HOA president, who seemed determined to make us miserable. It began harmlessly enough. About a week after we settled in, there was a knock at the door. Karen stood on our porch holding a clipboard, a forced smile plastered on her face. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped, though her eyes were already sweeping our property for flaws. "I just wanted to inform you that your mailbox does not comply with community standards. You'll need to replace it within 7 days." I smiled politely and explained that our house was not part of the HOA. I even offered to show her the documents proving it. She waved me off with a dismissive flick of her hand. "That's a very common misunderstanding," he said with a patronizing laugh. "All homes within this visual corridor fall under our aesthetic rules. Here's a copy of our handbook." She shoved a thick 3-ring binder into my arms before I could protest. Later, I flipped through it and found more than 100 pages of absurdly detailed regulations, approved tones of beige for siding, acceptable lawn edging styles, even strict limits on garden gnome height. The following week, Karen returned to complain about our landscaping. The week after that, it was our porch lighting. Every time, calmly reiterated that we weren't members of the HOA. Each time, her irritation escalated. Elaine suggested, ignoring her entirely, which worked for roughly 48 hours before violation notices began appearing taped to our mailbox. Things deteriorated rapidly. Karen started photographing our home from the street, sometimes lingering for 15 minutes to document supposed violations. Once, she blocked our driveway with her golf cart, the unofficial transport of petty dictators, while measuring our hedges with the tape measure. When I asked her to move, she lectured me for 20 straight minutes about civic duty and neighborhood harmony. The breaking point came when we received a certified letter claiming we owed $750 in HOA fines. That was when I decided we were done playing nice. I installed a security gate at the end of our driveway. It wasn't intimidating, just a simple wrought iron design with a keypad and intercom, but the message was unmistakable. This was private property. Karen was livid. She left voicemail after voicemail demanding the access code for emergency inspection purposes. She referenced imaginary bylaws, cited non-existent statutes, and threatened lawsuits. I archived everything, every voicemail, every note, every piece of evidence documenting her unraveling behavior. Elaine, who works as an emergency dispatcher, warned that if it continued, we might need to pursue a restraining order. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was working from home when the gate buzzer started blaring nonstop. On the security feed, Karen stood there with her finger pressed hard against the button, her face set in stubborn determination. I hesitantly answered the intercom. "You need to open this gate immediately," she barked without introduction. "I've received a complaint and must perform an inspection." Took a breath. "Karen," I said evenly, You know we are not part of the HOA. You have no authority here. Please stop harassing us." Her face twisted with rage. "Do not question my authority. I've been president of this association for 7 years. Open this gate right now, or face the consequences," I sighed. "Karen, I'm working. Please leave our property, or I will report you for harassment." She leaned closer to the camera. "You'll regret this," she hissed, then stormed back to her golf cart. I assumed that was the end of it for the moment. I was wrong. Roughly 20 minutes later, the security system notified me of movement at the gate. When I checked the feed, I saw Karen on her phone, waving her arms wildly as she pointed straight at our house. I turned the volume up just in time to hear her say, "Yes. I need police here immediately." I heard screaming coming from inside the house, and now they refuse to open the gate. I believe someone may be injured. The address is 4287 Oakwood Drive. My stomach dropped. She was calling 911 and fabricating an emergency. I immediately tried calling my wife at work, but she didn't pick up. She was on shift, and personal calls weren't always possible. All I could do was wait, heart pounding, as Karen paced back and forth in front of our gate, occasionally shooting the camera smug, victorious looks. What I didn't realize at the time was that Elaine herself had answered Karen's 911 call. She recognized Karen's voice instantly from the many confrontations at our front door. Even more importantly, she recognized our address and knew there was no emergency happening there. Elaine followed proper procedure. She couldn't simply dismiss the call, but she flagged it as a likely false report and dispatched officers for a welfare check rather than a full emergency response. She also added a note to the dispatch log stating that the caller had a documented history of harassing the residents at that address. Less than 10 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up near our gate. Karen immediately hurried over, pointing emphatically toward our house, as if presenting evidence. I stepped outside and entered the gate code, exiting while keeping the gate firmly closed behind me. "Officers, I'm the homeowner," I said, handing over my ID. "There is no emergency. This woman has been harassing us for months because we won't comply with HOA rules that don't apply to our property." One of the officers nodded and pressed a finger to his earpiece. His expression shifted as he listened. "Sir, is your wife Elaine Miller?" he asked. I nodded, puzzled. "She's working dispatch right now and provided us with additional context about this situation," he said. He then turned toward Karen, whose confident smile was beginning to crack. "Ma'am, did you place a 911 call claiming there were screams and a possible emergency at this address?" "Yes," Karen snapped. "They refused to open the gate. Someone inside could be hurt." The officer's tone hardened. "Ma'am, the dispatcher who received your call is this homeowner's wife. She has informed us that you've repeatedly harassed this family over HOA matters, despite their property being outside your authority. She also confirmed there was no emergency at the time of your call." The color drained from Karen's face. That's not true. I heard something. She's clearly protecting her husband." The second officer stepped closer. "Ma'am, all emergency calls are recorded. We have your exact statements. You claim to hear screaming, but dispatch records show you've made similar reports against other residents who challenged you in the past." By now, several neighbors had gathered along the street, quietly observing the unfolding scene. Karen's eyes flicked between the officers and the onlookers, panic setting in. For the first time, she seemed completely speechless. "Karen Wilkins," the first officer said formally, "you are being placed under arrest for filing a false police report and misuse of emergency services." As he read her rights, Karen's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally fear. "This is absurd," she protested. "I'm the HOA president. You can't arrest me for protecting the neighborhood." But they could, and they did. As the officers guided her toward the patrol car, Karen shot me a look filled with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Actually, Karen," I replied calmly, "I think it is." The neighbors watched in stunned silence as Karen was seated in the back of the cruiser. One older man slowly approached me afterward. "We've wanted to say something about her behavior for years," he admitted quietly. "No one ever had the nerve to stand up to her. After giving my statement, I went back inside and finally reached Elaine during her break. She confirmed everything I suspected. She had recognized Karen's voice and our address immediately. I couldn't believe she went that far, Elaine told me, but I made sure every detail was properly recorded. Her false report is fully documented. Karen's legal consequences were severe. 3 weeks later, at her hearing, she was found guilty of filing a false police report and misusing emergency services. The judge showed little sympathy, especially after reviewing our extensive documentation of her harassment. She was fined $5,000, sentenced to 1 year of probation, and ordered to complete 200 hours of community service. On top of that, a restraining order was issued, barring her from coming within 100 feet of our property or contacting us in any way. The most satisfying outcome, however, came from inside the HOA itself. An emergency meeting was called, and Karen was unanimously removed from her position as president. It turned out we were far from the only people she had bullied. As she was escorted out of the meeting, her face frozen in disbelief, it finally sank in that her reign of petty tyranny had come to an end.